Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel and blog. I'm Jenny Hall. Thanks for joining me for another card tutorial. Today I'm doing some spritzing onto stamps and creating a faux watercolor look. I'll be using Vintage Leaves stamp set and Sending Thoughts stamp set. I'm also going to add just a tiny little bird from the Birds and Blooms. I'm going to start out doing my stamping today with Pear Pizzazz. I'm working with a piece of watercolor paper, and if you notice, watercolor paper has a texture on one side and it's a little more smooth on the other. I like to work with the smooth side whenever I'm using stamps because this will allow a better stamped image. To do faux watercoloring or just spritzing onto a rubber stamp, then it's not a lot of process. The way that I approach this, and this is not a new technique by any means, this is something old that I'm just bringing back to life. I like to take a regular stamp, and it can be photopolymer or rubber, and take your Stampin' spritzer filled with water and just add a spritz of water onto an inked up stamp. From there, you can stamp it directly onto your paper, and then take your water brush and kind of smooth out the edges to get the look that you want to have on the card. Sometimes a spritzed image can be a little splotchy, so I use the water brush to even it out. See, this one is a little splotchy here, so I don't want to change the look of the stamped image. I just want to kind of even out those splotches. Sometimes the splotches are really nice. It just depends on the look that you're going for with your project. To give a different tone of color for different variants of images, as an example, the way that leaves are not always the same color, then try stamping off. I'm using a paper towel for this project here. You can easily use a piece of scrap paper or something, but I'm using a paper towel, and what I do is I'm taking and inking up the stamp, then I dab it onto the paper towel, which takes off a little bit of the ink, spray it with a spritzer, and then take it over to the watercolor paper, and that gives me a bit of a lighter tone of Pear Pizzazz. It's still Pear Pizzazz ink, but it's a much lighter shade. For the design concept in this project, I started off with the leaves that I wanted to feature in the foreground. So I wanted to have a really clear image of the leaves that were supposed to be closer to my face. And I'm now going to be working on getting some lighter tones, and that will be what would be further away from my eye in nature. If you go outside and look at a tree or a shrub, then some of the images that are further from your eye will have a different tone. We can get that same look with our crafting projects. We just have to be a little intentional about how we go about getting it. So this variance of tone is a really great way to fill up the space of paper that you're working on your card, and it's just a quick technique. This faux watercolor or spritzing on your stamp is something that is just giving a different look to a stamp set that has been well loved for many, many years. Once this image is completely dry, then I'm going to do the heat embossing of the sentiment. I'm choosing something from Sending Thoughts stamp set, and it says, "Be still, I've got this." And it's signed from God. So I thought that would be a nice, peaceful sentiment. It brings peace to my soul, and I thought, well, this is a peaceful looking card to me, and the copper embossing powder that I'm using with the Versamark sticky ink is a nice complement to the chocolate chip layer and the Pear Pizzazz of the card base and the stamping. I'm using the snail adhesive to adhere everything together. When you're working with watercolor paper, one thing to keep in mind is you might need to step up your adhesive a little bit, such as using fast fuse instead of using snail adhesive. Snail is a great adhesive, but it's not quite as strong and gummy as fast fuse is. Everything is going to be popped up on dimensionals after I have the units put together. And here you'll see a tiny little vellum bird that I made from the Blooms and Birds, I think it was. Everything is going to be listed for supplies in the video description. I cut out a few bird die cuts before I settled on the small one. I almost didn't include anything at all, but I thought it would be something nice to show just a little bit of interest, and it reminds me that God is always there, whether we realize it or not. He's just always around. I'm showing the inside of the card now. I'm doing the same technique but on plain Whisper White cardstock. I'm not putting any watercolor paper inside the card at all. I'm doing some stamping off, and the one thing to keep in mind is if you do plan to use regular cardstock, that it doesn't accept as much water. Thank you guys once again for joining me for another card tutorial. I hope you like this card project. I invite you over to my blog at jennystampsup.com for more card making inspiration. Here is 2 more videos you might like to watch and an opportunity to subscribe and visit my blog. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the video. Have a good day!